After doing all the work, the thing that makes me feel like I'm enough is that I found the confidence and I found like, this is who I am and it's okay. And I found my voice and I live in my truth. Like, but I didn't have that then.
I want to go back to the 15-year-old you that starts drinking, and tell me about that period in your life. You know, kind of those teenage years, pre-college. You're drinking. Do you think it's sort of like recreational fun? Everybody's doing it. Tell me about it.
I think it was a little bit of both. That was around the same time I'd asked to go to a therapist. I was, I think, experiencing some depression, but nobody knew how to handle it. And so I said, I'm feeling bad. I'm feeling sad. I didn't have the words or vernacular to really explain it or describe it. And so I also started cutting a little bit. And so I started carving in my arm. I mean, not cutting, but I would take this pin and I would, because the physical pain was easier to deal with than emotional pain. And so once that kind of, stopped, I mean, it wasn't enough. And I started drinking. Drinking was the one thing that gave me the release or the calmness or that feeling. It eliminated the feeling of, not being good enough or not being seen, or because all of the things I had, I had straight A's. I was the number one, I was a top swimmer in the country at age 11 and 12. I had all of these things on the outside that would say I was good enough, but I didn't feel that way. I didn't feel good enough, smart enough, pretty enough. Like I never felt enough for any room I was in. And so as soon as I put alcohol in my body, those voices quieted and I could just escape and be numb. And so I liked that. And I also wanted to fit in. I also didn't have, I think it goes back to like self-confidence and self-esteem. It was going through that, I was going through that pubescent stage and I wasn't sure where I fit in, and I had moved schools. I got picked on, sat by myself at lunch, at all the, all the things. I didn't have a lot of friends. And so I wanted to fit in and I was willing to do so it was like that confluence of things, probably a little bit of depression, wanting to fit in, not feeling good enough. And for me, drinking did it. But for me, I also, believe that addiction is a disease. It's not a decision. And so I think once I flipped that switch, then I couldn't stop, and it just kind of escalated from there.
Yeah. And if you can, and thank you for saying that, I relate to that, not enoughness. But I'm curious in your case, and I know you've probably looked at this and at the time were not, aware of it, but where do you think that comes from? I mean, you mentioned the depression, but the feeling that hole inside of you of not being enough, where do you think that came from for you?
That's a good question. I think it came from, lack of self-esteem, that comparing out. Like, I compared my insides of feeling uncomfortable to other people's outsides. And so, I think you've done a lot of work too. And what we see is that the people that are angry and mean are usually the most insecure. But as a 14 and 15-year-old girl, I saw them as the confident ones, the ones I needed to please, and so I also have, people pleasing. And I was like, okay, I just need everybody to like me. And I didn't yet understand that if I could just be me, it would attract the people that liked me to me versus me trying to go out and like recruit, to recruit people to like me. And at a young age, I didn't understand that. So I don't know, and I think it was just like lack of that self-confidence. And I think that's pretty pervasive in young kids. And
yeah, I was going to say that just, hearing you, it's, I wonder just how pervasive it is. Like, I mean, I don't know. I think it's pretty societal. It's like everywhere. Like, I think a lot of kids go through that. People live into it. It's probably part of what's wrong in the world, right? Is that you have a bunch of grown people doing this still, right? Children. It's never enough. And yeah. I mean, listen, I can fall into the trap still today. I mean, it's interesting how, sometimes the ego finds its way back into the driver's seat and you want to do, a little bit more of this and that, and whether it's work or Instagram or the next thing. It's, it can happen. Still for me, it's my fight. And part of that is just like, I think the world that we live in, especially, kids, are told perform, get into college, get into good college. I mean, I see even, I think with my kids, like we don't put pressure on them at all for academics, but we don't have to because they feel it just in their peers. And it's not even like a horrible thing. Like they're so upset about it. They just like naturally think that's what they're supposed to do.
The paradigm.
Yeah.
That's what we're told, right?
Yeah.
The paradigm we're supposed to do. I read something and we were talking about the ego. It's like healing comes when you tell the ego to sit in the corner and you tap the wounds in order to find out where you need to heal. Something. Yeah. And I love that. And I think that was kind of, I feel like my parents' generation too. Like you push your kids to be better and do better. But because it's a reflection on them, it's a reflection on the parents if they don't. And I think that's, I don't know, love it. No, that's a whole conversation. Loving the child for who they are and whatever their strengths are. And, I said that to my son. I'm like, what? And he's 6, so it doesn't really get it. And I'm like, if you want to be whatever you want to be, I will love and support you. If you want to be a starving artist and be a painter on the streets of Barcelona because that fills your heart with joy and that gives you purpose, I will support that because it's your life. It's not mine. And he's like, no, you're the boss of me. I'm like, I'm not the boss of you. I just put boundaries up when you're little because I need to keep you safe.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're the boss of you.
Yeah. Yeah. I know my youngest at times is like, no, tell me what to do. I'm like, it's your call. And he's like, no, you're the parent, I want you to tell me. I'm like, okay, if you want me to, I'll tell you what I think, but I don't know. It's your call at the end of the day. But it is interesting, just that paradigm. And so tell me, you're starting to then get into the drinking, and and the reason I asked the question initially is there's a lot of that just goes on, right? I mean, I certainly did a lot of that in high school around that age, and I had a lot of friends that pretty much everybody was doing it. It felt just like sort of what you did. You could look back now and see people that were actually in a lot of pain. Yeah. They weren't just having fun. It wasn't just a party. This was like, very soothing, numbing, and addictive. So tell me about, kind of how that goes for you.
And I think I wanted to say one more thing too, when you asked about like what it was at 15 that created that. And the only, I have an answer for that based on how I feel now, after doing all the work. The only the thing that makes me feel like I'm enough is that I found the confidence and I found like, this is who I am and it's okay. And I found my voice and I live in my truth, like all of that, but I didn't have that then. And that's the only, I'm like, I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of. But,
right.
Yeah. So I was, 15 and I started drinking, and it was at like, the college, not the college, the lacrosse games. And we would do all the, sneaky things. We thought we were being sneaky. We'd pour vodka and watermelons and like eat it. And we're like, it's just watermelon. And, we'd party in fields and I don't know that I liked it, but I didn't like the way I felt when I wasn't doing it, if that makes sense. And so it's kind of like, but I never liked the taste of beer. I never liked, I don't know, feeling, it's like, it's such a paradox. I didn't like feeling out of control, but I liked the freedom of it, and it's like, it's just this, and I feel like that's how it was for all 15 years. It was like that space of purgatory. It was like a brief escape until you went over the edge of into the blackouts or into the edge of no turning back. And it's, yeah.
And was it starting to impact your swimming?
100%.
Yeah. And you could notice that, but the trade-off to you felt like...
Didn't care.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my grades were starting to slip. My drinking was starting to increase. I'd gotten removed from the elite group and moved back to a lower group. My sister was moved to the elite group, so she was younger. I remember she beat me in a race, and my mom was like, ooh. And so all of these things were I mean, it's life, right? Life happens. So some things were just happening, and I use those as like an excuse to accelerate my drinking. It's like, well, I'm not good at this, and I'm not, and someone said to me, when I was getting straight A's and I was getting the fastest swimmer, and they're like, well, if you do this better, you'll be better. If you train harder, you'll get faster. And if you study harder, you'll get better grades. And you do, and I was like, but I'm already the best, and I'm already really good. And in that was like, well, that's not good enough. So what I'm doing isn't good enough. So maybe I'll be really good at this. I'm not good at being good. So maybe I'll be good at being not bad. I don't want to say bad, but the other way. And, yeah. And so all of that started, started kind of deteriorating a lot. And my mom will tell you, she's like, I just thought it was a phase. I thought it was like, and my parents were also at that point in the middle of a divorce. And that was tough. But it also gave me the freedom to explore my addiction and my drinking a little bit more, because they were living in separate homes. I was sneaking out. I was doing the things that, kids do. And we'd sneak out and smoke pot in a tent and steal liquor from my friend's dad's liquor cabinet, because my parents didn't keep liquor in the home. And so do all of those things. And ironically, the girl that I used to do all this stuff with is also in recovery. And there's a group of like 20 kids from my high school class that are all in recovery. Yeah. It's incredible.
Yeah. There's probably a group of 20 kids from my class that should be. Anyway, I have to ask, because I am curious, about your brother, and at what point it starts to become noticeable that he's, a very talented swimmer. And what I'm curious about really is if that had any impact on you as you were, growing up around that.
So in my opinion and experience, for me, there's a 7-year age difference. And so it was it was tougher when my sister started beating me, because we're females and we were racing. And so, when I was a senior in college, my brother was 15. Yeah, it was the year he went to his first Olympics. And so he was 15. And so he was he was 14 when he got, rookie of the meet at nationals. He was 14 and went to nationals as the youngest swimmer. And I remember saying, I was like, he's going to be someone, he's going to be amazing. We're drinking beers in my college apartment. And, all the guys in the swim team were like, yeah, he's just good. Like, I'm like, no. He's like, he's your brother. Yeah, I'm like, just wait, it's coming. And so, we knew then that he was an exceptional athlete. But in my last event of my swimming career, it was the mile, and he came down on deck and counted for me, because you have a little lap counter. So that was really special. And then that summer we went to Sydney to watch the Olympics for when he was 15. It didn't have as much of an impact on, I was just proud, and I was just a proud sister. And so it didn't have any impact on my, we were far enough apart. Yeah. In my opinion, it had more of an impact on my sister, because my sister was an Olympic hopeful. She was third in the world at 14. She went to trials in 96. She got fifth. Her time would have won the Olympics in 96. It was, human currency. It was a bad meet, which is what happens in sports,
It's tough, though.
And so that was heartbreaking for her, because my words, because she had given up at everything. My sister never drank or smoked. She did nothing in high school. The opposite of what I did. She was good. She was in bed. She took care of herself, all those things. And, so I think that, was more challenging on her than it was on me, that success.
And so that's great that you were, kind of in that difference in age. I have younger brothers that are much different in age than me too. So I get that. And you're also at a point where you're like, later in college, and you can really just sort of like be cheering for them. Yep. But, between your parents' divorce and how it's impacting your sister, and even just like by itself, like he's now, in the Olympics at 15 years old. Does that become a challenge at all for your family? Is it a bonding thing? Is it like an awesome, like, cool, we're doing this? Or is it people are being pulled in different directions? Tell me, about the dynamic now that he's, at that sort of level.
Yeah, I mean, in 2000, it was exciting. There's the youngest swimmer since 1932 to youngest male swimmer since 1932 to make the Olympic team. And it was really exciting. Our whole family was there. My sister didn't go. She couldn't make it. And that was really exciting. And then each year it kind of escalated a little bit more because he got better. 6 medals, 6 gold medals. 2004, 8 in 2008, 28 over. I lost count at some point. 28 overall. Yeah. And so it changed. I mean, in 2004, I was still drinking. And someone in the throes of their addiction, I thought it was about me. I'm like, I'm celebrating because this is a huge, and it wasn't about me. And so personally, I think I made it more about me at that point when I was still drinking than it was about supporting him, even though we were there and cheering him. And we have these beautiful moments of being able to cheer him on. But then in 2008, that was kind of the big one, right? That was the one where it changed everything. Thank God I was sober. Because it could have gotten, it just could have been, a great excuse to celebrate. I just celebrated 1 year of sobriety. And so the only challenge was that everywhere we went, people like champagne and wine and, all of the things, and saying no. It was like, oh my gosh. And it was the flip phone. So it was hard to text my sponsor is working with a woman. And, but that's really when the whole thing changed because nobody knew. It had never been done before. And so all of a sudden it became, it impacted a lot because, he was just doing what he loved to do and was really good at things that he loved to do and became really successful at things he loved to do. But it changed the lives of everybody overnight because, we couldn't go to a family dinner without somebody coming up and saying, I hate to do this, but it's like the famous line, or, somebody, throwing insults or opinions as we walked down the street as a family or through the, through the train station on what they thought about his whatever. And then that becomes really hard and you become really insulated because then you don't know, who do you trust?
I want to talk about that really. And I want to talk about really, your experience in life and how, and to the extent that being a part of your family impacts your experience. I'm happy to hear about it, but I'm interested in really, your journey. And so I'd like to just, back up a little bit. You kind of fast forwarded to sobriety, and I'm kind of curious, what happens that leads you to the point of needing help? Did you have a rock bottom? Did you how did you decide that all of a sudden, you needed to enter into treatment or kind of start your recovery journey?
Yeah. And so the thing about addiction and recovery is that it's every person's decision on when they've had enough. And so I've had people say to me, well, your bottom's not that bad. And I said, well, it's bad. And it was bad enough for me. It was enough, and for a really long time I stayed out because I was just a wine drinker, right? That was my drink of choice. I mean, I would drink whatever you put in front of me. I drank all the way through college. I started experiencing blackouts, but I thought it was normal for a collegiate athlete, a collegiate student to have those, because that's what college was for, to get that stuff out. But when I entered into the real world and I got a job and I was, doing all the adult stuff, it continued. I was blacking out. I was drinking every night. But I chose wine because I liked it. And because, alcoholics don't drink wine. They drink out of a brown paper bag because that's what we're shown. That's what we're shown in Meg Ryan, When a Man Loves a Woman, Nicolas Cage, and Leaving Las Vegas. Those are the depictions of alcoholics and addicts, people that are really struggling and really suffering and losing everything and their world's imploding around them. But that wasn't the case for me. I still had a job. I still had a family. I still had, I hadn't been kicked out of an apartment. I was still making money. So I was a pretty high functioning addict. I wasn't drinking before work. I wasn't drinking at lunch, the things that we're told that defines an addict or an alcoholic. And so for me, I was blacking out. So every time I put alcohol in my body, I would forget what happened the night before. Sometimes there were brownouts, meaning I would kind of come in and out of like consciousness, meaning I'd wake up, I'm like, I kind of remember that, but I don't know if that, what it was. And it started to get really scary when I'd fall a lot. Every morning I'd wake up and I'd climb in the shower and I'd sit with my knees to my chest and the water would be on it crying. I'm like, gosh, my body's in pain. My kidneys hurt. I can't do this anymore. But by noon I'm like, oh, I feel okay. And you kind of forget all of the pain that had, happened that morning and the night before. And you're like, well, maybe this time will be different. Maybe this time when I drink, it'll be different or look different or feel different, or I'll have a different experience, right? Like the definition of insanity, doing the same thing and expecting different results. And that was kind of my, Groundhog's Day every single day. And when I would commute train. So I lived outside of Washington, D.C. And there was one, a couple incidents like this that would start to happen. I'd end up in Anacostia. So I don't know if you're familiar with D.C., but it's an area that I don't go to, especially at night alone. And I'd ended up at that, I took the wrong way on the metro back to my car. So I was going to drive, and I got a text the next day. It's like, hey, I put you back on the train. And I'm like, I don't even know who this is. And I don't remember that. And so, they say God protects babies and drunks. And so probably good, maybe some of the things that I don't remember, but that started to get really scary. And at the time I had a boyfriend and we broke up and I moved to DC and I was on my own. And I'm like, this is it. This is it. Now I can drink however I want it, however I want to. I have no parameters. I only have to show up at work in the morning. And it was on, and it was 10 days just on my own in this studio apartment in Washington, D.C. And I would go to the liquor store and I'd drink every night, or I'd go out, and I was getting kicked out of bars. I was also smoking at the time. And it was painful, like emotionally, spiritually, physically. And I got a call from my ex-boyfriend and he was like, this is really bad. Like, I was worried about you before, but I'm really worried about you. And if you don't get help somehow, I'm going to call your family and I'm going to tell them everything and tell them how bad you are and I had tried to go into 12-step meetings. I was seeing a therapist at the time, a year before that. So I'd been trying for a couple of years to get into the program, into not drinking. So I knew I was a problem drinker, but I knew my life was unmanageable, but I didn't think I had a problem. I hadn't connected the dots yet. And so, 12-step meetings really scared me at first. And that was the only thing I knew. I didn't know anybody, other than the woman I drank with in high school. And she was the one I called. It's a funny story. I went on MySpace, remember, like the original. And I went on MySpace and she had, I don't drink and I don't smoke. Those were two of the things that you could add. And I emailed her and I was like, I used to drink and smoke with you all the time. What do you mean? Like, this isn't, she's like, I got sober 5 years ago, and she said, your elevator's going down and you can get off at any time. And something about that line stuck. Yeah. I'm like, oh, so I have a choice? This is, a choice. And so I still kept kind of going in and out. But I Googled, I looked online for treatment centers. I'm like, well, I can't go to inpatient because people have real problems when they go to inpatient. That's and I still didn't want anybody to know. I wanted to do it in secret. I drank in secret. A lot of the things I did in secret. And so I didn't want people to know that I was going to treatment. So I found outpatient. So I'd go after work. I'd go to work during the day and then I'd go to outpatient at night and, but I still wasn't sure. I wasn't sure it was going to stick. I'm like, well, if this doesn't work, then I'll try something else. But I kind of went in there thinking like, I just want to get this. I just don't want my parents to know. I just don't want my parents to know how bad it was. And they knew I was drinking a lot. They knew I was, maybe a problem drinker. And my dad had come to my apartment one time for my birthday, and I was just passed out in bed. I couldn't get out. Like everything hurt. And he's like, this isn't good, Hilary. I'm like, yeah, just this one time. My bottom was the shame. I didn't want people to find out. I still wanted to keep my drinking secret, and I knew it was starting to crack.